I'm not. hereby call the Palm Springs regular City Council meeting of January 28th, 2021 to order. We apologize for our delay. We had technical difficulties here. Thank you for staying with us. So first on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if our Emergency Management Coordinator, Danny DeSalm, could please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and everyone who's able can stand and join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Danny. Next is roll call. City Clerk, if you could conduct the roll call, please.
Councilmember Garner?
Here.
Councilmember Coors?
Here.
Councilmember Woods?
Here, present.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton?
Present.
Mayor Holstedge?
Here.
All council is present.
Thank you. We have a number of presentations tonight. The first one is from CVAG, the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, on flooding and Blowsand. They have an update for us. I believe Tom Kirk, the Executive Director, is here with us in chambers.
Again, it's Tom Kirk at CVAG. It's good to see all of you, and a Happy New Year, and congratulations on a number of first, Mayor. I do want to acknowledge that I know 3 of the 5 of you have seen this presentation before, and you had asked me to come back and share it with your colleagues and also the community, because it has some pretty significant implications for the city and the region as a whole. And I do also want to note this is about bad weather. And it's not the bad weather that I complained about today. In other words, sunny skies in the 60s, while our friends in Calgary are not complaining about 6-degree temperatures. So this is a different sort of bad weather. And it's a bad weather that we really experienced February 14th a couple years ago, the Valentine's Day floods. And you all remember these images. And these images caused a whole lot of disruption for our communities in the Coachella Valley, notably many hour-long delays, disruptions over a couple days. And for many of us, it was an inconvenience. However, for those trying to get to Palm Springs, and particularly Desert Regional Hospital, it was more than an inconvenience. As your colleague, Mayor Scott Mattis, has shared with you, this was really a life and death situation, where it could take 15 minutes for residents of his to get to the hospital in normal circumstances. It could take over an hour or more in this situation on February 14th. So CVAG's Transportation Committee sprung to action and commissioned a study about what to do about these sorts of circumstances. And we know it's not just the big events, but there are small events periodically as well that flood area roads, and it's not just in Palm Springs, but Cathedral City and Desert Hot Springs as well. And of course, your staff has to deal with this almost annually. On the streets of Palm Springs and the north part, particularly Indian Avenue, we have Blowsand events that do close the roadways. That's a pretty big closure of a roadway. We commissioned a company called Michael Baker International. We engaged your staff, particularly Marcus here and the team in Palm Springs, and developed a study that we presented to CVAG's Transportation and Executive Committees in December. The area is one that you know well, the north part of the city of Palm Springs, along with Desert Hot Springs and the north part of Cathedral City. Indian, Palm, Gene Autry, Two Bunch Palms, et cetera, were some of the roadways we evaluated. You might realize there's been a couple of very big projects on the books for the city and CVAG for literally decades. It is envisioned that we would build a bridge from the South Dike along the Whitewater River all the way up to the railroad on Indian as well as Gene Autry. Each of those structures is estimated to cost, in yesterday's dollars, $250 million. And then there are a number of other projects throughout the Coachella Valley that we've taken a hard look at and assumed over the years that there'd be another $100 million or $75 million of projects, many in Desert Hot Springs and some in Cathedral City. That's a huge price tag for any region to weather, and it's something we had to take a really hard look at. And the primary reason we had to take a hard look at, this is a complicated graph, but your Transportation Committee members know our cash flow situation doesn't look particularly good for building roadways in the Coachella Valley in coming years. Green there is revenue, I guess salmon is expenses, and that line that dips below the white one is our fund balance. So cash flow is going to be a challenge, and our committee has asked us to take a look at revenue opportunities and, more importantly, savings on the cost side. Can we trim the cost of some of our transportation projects or perhaps even eliminate a couple? Historically, for big bridges, this city and cities throughout the Coachella Valley have used a state federal program called HBP, Highway Bridge Program. It provides almost 90% of the revenue or 90% of the funds to build projects that cross waterways like the Whitewater River. However, it is terribly oversubscribed. There are billions of dollars of projects in the state of California that go unfunded year after year, and the waiting list is literally decades long to get this funding. So we took a look at, is there a better way of accomplishing the objectives, allowing us to build bridges and other structures more cost effectively? And we asked a good engineering company to help us with that. I'm going to use Indian Avenue as an example of what could be done. Indian Avenue, this again, 2 to 2.5 mile long bridge structure, $250 million. We asked the team, is there a better way to do that? And they came back with a pretty solid recommendation, and that is, rather than build for perhaps the 1,000-year event, let's build for the events we do know occur along the two major waterways, the one coming out of Chino Canyon, and of course the main tributary or the main route for the Whitewater River. Two smaller structures using prefab bridge structures would cost only $35 million. And I know that's still a lot of money, but it's a whole lot less than $250 million. We actually asked the consultant, perhaps if we didn't want to spend $35 million, what could we do? And they said, well, if you're only really interested in emergency access, build a 14-foot wide structure and allow emergency vehicles over that in bad weather and allow bikes and others to use it every day. And the same type of approach could be used on Gene Autry. So if you look at that big price tag of $575 million and you start value engineering throughout the region, that big price tag goes down, both in Palm Springs in the red, and similar approaches were used in Desert Hot Springs and Cathedral City, and voila, we get down to something much more manageable. $115 million. Do we have $115 million in the bank today? No, but over time, this is something that can be accomplished. Next, we asked the consultant, where are the highest priority projects? And this is not going to come as a surprise to you or your residents or residents throughout the region, including Desert Hot Springs and Cathedral City. The highest priority projects are, sure enough, getting across the Whitewater River in Palm Springs. They're the highest priority because there are not very many options. And we asked our consultant, well, would you build those two projects first? And they said, kind of. Build just one of them. And it could be Gene Autry, or it could be Indian. And there are some good reasons to go with either. Right now, I think your staff and ours is leaning towards Indian, but we want to take a hard look at it. Our next steps are, frankly, to sit down with your staff and come back to the City of Palm Springs City Council and the other affected city councils with hard and fast recommendations and ones that we can move forward with and ones that have a realistic chance of being accomplished. We could turn the PowerPoint off, and I'd be happy to address any questions. And again, I thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions for Tom? Or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Middleton.
Thank you. First, I want to just make a comment. This came up at the CVAG Transportation Committee, and certainly at that time, Mayor Mattis and I were very concerned about this issue. But that we have advanced this far is credit to the entire Coachella Valley and members of the Transportation Committee across the valley. And some of the strongest spokespersons on that committee that this was a regional issue were our colleagues that are in mid and eastern Coachella Valley. So this is truly an example of cooperation on a regional basis. And with that, Tom, could you give us some of the reasoning why you're leaning towards Indian Canyon as being the highest priority or the best place to start?
Yeah, and thank you for giving acknowledgement to you and your colleagues on the Transportation Committee. And we look forward to having you, Councilmember Woods, on that committee this next year. Indian has some advantages, and if Marcus would like to chime in, I certainly encourage him to do so. One of which is you are right on the cusp of another project there, and that is the widening of the bridge over the railroad. That is a part of the solution here. And I think another key element, frankly, from your colleagues in Desert Hot Springs is Indian provides a slightly better route out for the entire city of Desert Hot Springs, where Palm Gene Autry is perhaps situated a little bit further to the east. And I think in the long run, Indian might be a little less expensive as well. And as you all know, your development actually extends a little further north along Indian than it does on Palm Gene Autry. So for physical as well as transportation reasons, it looks like Indian might be the way to go. Marcus, did I miss anything?
It's also the direct route to Desert Regional, which, as we know, is the only trauma center in the Coachella Valley. So that would be our recommendation, is that Indian is the top priority to focus our attention with the limited funds that are available out there.
I would certainly concur with that conclusion that Indian should be our highest priority. And it would seem to me that we've got to figure out how we're going to, well, this is significantly less. We still have to figure out how we're going to raise the money to build even prefab bridges.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from council members?
Mayor, with respect to raising money, we do raise money, and as you all know, we have a half-cent sales tax measure in this county, and we have development impact fees, and yet we are going to be short on funds in the long haul. What I can assure you about is getting across the Whitewater River has been a high-priority project, not just for Desert Hot Springs or just for Palm Springs. It has been one of our highest priority projects for decades. So certainly in your staff's opinion, and it'll ultimately be you and your colleagues that make the decision, this would be one of the highest ranked projects in this TPPS, our capital improvement program, and I suspect in future ones as well.
Just last question, Tom. How should we approach making a decision as to whether or not the emergency access bridge versus the prefab bridges that cars could travel on a routine basis. How should we go about that, making that decision?
What I'd suggest is give us a little bit more time. As you know, Mayor Pro Tem, this was a study looking at lots of projects and areas of the western part of the Coachella Valley, and we didn't dig down like I want to. If it is Indian that we want to explore, I think one of our next steps with your staff is to engage a contractor to look at specific design solutions on Indian, and they ought to include perhaps an emergency access / CV link extending to the north, and a longer-term permanent structure that could get vehicles across these waterways every day of the year. So it may not be an either or, it might be an and it might be a question of timing.
All right.
Thank you. So I didn't realize you weren't done, Mayor Pro Tem. Are there any other questions or comments from council members? If not, thank you to the Mayor Pro Tem for all of her work on this important project. Thank you to CVAG for doing what they do best and coordinating between the cities on this important project for all of our residents of the Valley. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation, which is our COVID-19 case update from Emergency Management Coordinator Danny DeSalle.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. So as everybody knows, we came out of the regional stay-at-home order on Monday, and we returned to the purple tier. So what we have up here is what the tier system was. Currently, we're at about 110 cases per 100,000 across Riverside County. The goal to get us back into the red tier, which we were in September, is between 4 and 7 cases per 100,000. So even though we're back in the tier system, we have a long way to go. But what being back in the purple tier means is that we can return to outdoor dining and outdoor gyms, outdoor religious services, and we can go back to barbershops, nail salons, and other personal services. So it's good for people, it's good for our residents, it's also good for our businesses. And that's just some highlights of what changes back in the purple system, or the purple tier. The entire list is on the Blue Book for reopening, which can be visited at that link. So a quick update on the case counts, since we were pretty bad last week. Last week was the worst week yet. Cases across the county are about half of what they were last week. So last week we had 34,000 cases across the county in 7 days, and then last week it was 16,000, so just under half. And here in Palm Springs, it went from 438 following New Year's to 158 last week. So very good improvements. It also looks good for hospitals, even though our ICU rates are still at 0%. The hospital patient rate is down. New case counts are trending downward, and hopefully we continue on that trajectory. And with that, we have both testing and vaccination sites throughout the city. Tomorrow is the last day at the convention center for testing for the county site. They're in negotiations with the county on trying to turn that into a vaccination site. There's a couple of hurdles that they're working through as far as the cold storage and some other things. We should know within a few weeks whether that will open or not. Without that one, we still have the Indio County site for vaccinations. As well as I put a couple other sites here in the city that have the vaccinations available, to include Desert AIDS Project, who got 1,000 doses of the vaccine. And anytime that new vaccinations are available, those appointments book up within a few hours. So as they come out every few days, we just encourage people to call, and it's going to take between 15 minutes and an hour of waiting on hold if you can't make that appointment online. And if there's any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from council members or comments?
Just one. Danny, my understanding is, and it's great to see the numbers are better, but that Riverside County still has the most new cases of any county in the state. And I just want to confirm that and just remind people of the need to continue to be vigilant.
I would hate to say that Riverside County leads the state, but we do have that unfortunate award right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Danny, the county has been stating publicly that the Palm Springs Convention Center is going to open as a vaccination site. Is there any doubt in your mind that that is going to happen?
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't think that it's not going to happen. I talked to the convention center today, and there's just some logistics hurdles that they're trying to get through because the vaccines require cold storage, and does the convention center have that cold storage capability, which they don't. However, they can hold that vaccine for up to 5 days. So it's logistics concerns at this point, but it should be a couple weeks and the vaccination site will be open.
All right, thank you. We've got a lot of residents who are really anxious to have a location in Palm Springs that they can get to.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Danny, for the presentation. Just to echo some of the comments here, it remains extremely dangerous, some of the most dangerous times in this pandemic. And so though we're reopening based on projections that are, a few weeks out and downward trends, that does not mean that it's safe. And so I'd like to urge people to please stay at home as much as possible, continue to wear a mask and social distance, and not see people outside of your household. And hopefully we can get through this and get all of our residents vaccinated. So thank you to the county for working with us to open up the site of the convention center. Just to be clear, the city really has no role in the vaccination. So though you're getting your hundreds of emails about the vaccination process and the problems, we are forwarding those along to the county. And if you do need help, you can reach out to us and we can help you get the appropriate resources to get vaccinated, since we want everyone to get a vaccination who wants one. So thank you. The next presentation is a COVID-19 wastewater treatment update from the Assistant City Manager, Marcus Fuller.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you know, we've been continuing to sample and test on Mondays and Tuesdays at our wastewater treatment plant for the COVID virus in the wastewater stream. This is the trend of the graph showing the volume of COVID per liter in the wastewater samples. We started actually in August. This is showing approximately 73,000 COVID virus per liter back at the end of October, which we thought was high. It then spiked to over 900,000 at the beginning of December and went even further to 2.4 million in November, and then to a high of 2.6 million around the holidays. Luckily, as you see, the trend has been decreasing and has dropped, and it actually dropped last Monday to 1.1 million, and then had a slight uptick on our most recent sample from last Tuesday of 1.4 million. So what does that number mean? The current cases reported by the county for Palm Springs leaves about almost 800 active cases after you account for confirmed, recovered, and the unfortunate deaths. The samples are sent to a lab that specializes in the analysis of this data, and they develop a range of the number of cases represented by the number of virus per liter. and that range was between 1,700 and almost 8,000 cases, but on their model and the best science available, they predicted 3,287 cases represented by the samples taken on January 19th. We're also now having the lab test to ensure whether or not the samples taken from our wastewater stream have the UK variant. And luckily for us, both the samples tested last Monday, Tuesday, were not detected. So at this point, we're not showing any of those variants in our wastewater stream, and we'll continue to test for that just so we know whether or not that has been introduced into our community. With that, Madam Mayor, that completes my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from Marcus? Thank you, Marcus, for your foresight for tracking this data and sharing it with us. Very much appreciated. The next presentation is with Councilmember Jeff Kors, which is the University of California, San Francisco study on workers who are at risk for COVID-19.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think we have 2 slides. Great. So UCSF did a full analysis of the increased risk of death for essential workers per type of job. And what they found were the highest rates were cooks, people in packaging, agricultural workers, bakers, and those in other food-related